Growing your practice without adding more people, man, that sounds good. Employees are great, but do you always have to hire more in order to grow? We're going to take a bit of a departure from our normal practice care episode today, where normally I'm asking the questions and our guest knows all the answers. But today, neither of us really do. We're kind of figuring out as we go along. So we're going to have a bit of a riff session on this topic. Do you always need to hire more employees to grow? The gut answer is obviously no, not always. But through our kind of working it out with each other, let's see if we can figure out for everybody else. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they usually want, but when the provider owns the place, the care can be better because they have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think are best. Unlike when they're owned by somebody else, whoever that might be, usually their agenda starts to creep in, and that usually creates some compromised choices for the owner, which sometimes leads to compromises for the patient care that's delivered. So let's see if we can keep that at a minimum. And my guest today is Lauren Schwabish. Lauren is the owner of NeuroSpeech Services, a private practice based in Northern Virginia, specializing in person-centered assessment and treatment of cognitive communicative disorders related to stroke, brain injury, mild cognitive impairment, ADHD, and other neurologic and neurodegenerative conditions. She's licensed in the Commonwealth of Virginia and Maryland and is a certified member of the American Speech Language Hearing Association. She has over 23 years of experience working in hospitals and acute rehab centers, and she's passionate about providing meaningful and accessible health education about the brain to patients, families, and healthcare professionals. Lauren is committed to empowering communities with evidence-based information and best practices in brain health behaviors. She's also bursting at the seams and wondering how the heck she can grow in an efficient, effective way. Lauren, thanks for coming on PracticeCare.
Thank you for having me and helping me figure out some way forward.
Don't presume I've got any help yet. Let's see what we can figure out. We were talking before we are in this together. We were talking before we started recording about who's going to help who more, and I think it's probably going to be pretty balanced at the end of it all. So listeners, any regular listeners have gotten to know me pretty well, but fill in a bit about your background. We know your sort of clinical background and the nature of the practice, but tell us more about the practice side of the practice and, where the evolution is, and you're bursting at the seams and kind of where you stand from the business side.
Yeah. So I started my practice 2 years ago. So I just celebrated August 1st was my 2-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was lovely. Actually celebrated by not working. I had to take my daughter. I had to go pick my daughter up from camp. And so someone's like, how are you celebrating? And I was like, I have the flexibility to be on the road. So that was kind of a nice, exercising my freedoms as a private practice owner.
Little alone time. Nice.
Yep. So the practice started 2 years ago and accelerated quickly, which is wonderful. And so I was told by someone, I'm in Northern Virginia, so right outside of DC. There's lots of corporate, hospital rehab programs, but there really wasn't anyone doing what I'm doing. And so I spoke to one person who had somewhat of a similar model, and she warned me. She said, you're going to start it out and you're just going to have a wait list before you know it. So it's kind of turned out that way. Like all wonderful rehabilitation clinicians, I have a hard time saying no. Yeah. And so I just take people on, but I have 3 different ways that people work with me. So I do in-home therapy, I do virtual therapy, and then 1 day a week I have an office. And so I sit in one spot and, people come to me. So as the practice has gone on 2 years in, I sort of have a feel for what will sustain this. And it's probably less driving, right? Being in the car a little bit less. If anyone knows.
Right, because you see patients where they are, right?
Yeah, which honestly is a huge satisfier because I'm bringing sort of your high quality, neuro rehabilitation into the home, right? Where there are home health therapists, but it's not necessarily this type of therapy that people are getting. Yeah. And so I love that part of the practice. It's what makes me unique. It's really a great customer service standpoint because people who have cognitive impairments or any type of physical disability, the act of getting out to an appointment is exhausting
Yeah.
and expensive sometimes. And so it's good in a business aspect. It's also wonderful therapy because you are literally working in the home. So for people who are looking at, planning, organizing, memory, communication, like the home is your oyster, right? There's all sorts of stimuli that just generate the most meaningful functional work.
Right.
So I love that. But then as I look at my travel schedule, so over time in 2 years, I've been more reasonable about shrinking down my travel radius.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also looking at, the fact is, I think I will be happier if I have an office and people can come to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I love your take on is sort of the concept of groups, right? So group therapy, having a spot where I could have, let's say, high level cognitive therapy, right? So
Yeah.
individuals who have careers but have maybe a concussion, or individuals who are just looking at returning to the community. A group offering is also lovely, and I can't do that in my car, or I could do it
Tough to
virtually,
pull
but
off. Yeah.
yeah, right,
Maybe
right,
a
a little
minivan.
challenging,
I don't know. You could slam a few people in there.
be a little
Different
tricky.
issues. Yeah.
But I do think so. That's one of those things where it's like a different type of offering from a therapy standpoint. So I think office, finding an office, we were just talking about returning to work and how,
Yeah.
maybe people are coming off of the virtual platforms. So office space being pricey, I'm increasing my overhead, but on the other hand, I might be able to reduce my productivity in that I'm not going from place to place half an hour in the car here and there. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's lovely. I feel like I'm increasing my circle of influence too, which is another thing I'm really enjoying. One of the things I did before I started my practice was I was a rehabilitation clinical specialist, and I was a mentor. I was part of a mentor team
Mm-hmm.
of interdisciplinary therapists, and we were there to just help clinicians be the best they could be. So increasing their skill. And so that's something I miss, being all
Mm-hmm.
by myself. And I really think that's another opportunity to talk about scaling away from clinical care, and doing that so I can have greater outreach and support clinicians maybe want to do what I'm doing. And how do I incorporate that into my practice?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another idea I'd love to
So a
chew
lot of
on with you.
moving, a lot of move. So the first question that comes to my mind is, so you scale the resources to get the work done based on the work that you have to get done. Right now, it's the Lauren show, right? You're either in your
Mm-hmm.
office, you're driving around, you're doing whatever level of communication um, with patients. So when you threw the group concept in there, the first thought I had in my mind was probably the first place to start is you have some level of revenue, annual revenue today, whatever it is. You don't have to say what it is. The first thing I think you should do is to say, what do I want to grow into about? Nobody knows if it's going to happen. I want to double in size. I want to triple in size. I want to incrementally grow in size, whatever it is. That's what I would like. Then the next part from there is, and how would I get there? Could I get there with what I'm doing today? Sounds like you're about bursting at the seams. So maybe there's a little more growth in there, maybe not. But if you wanted to stepwise, whatever. So that's where groups come in, and that's where other concepts come in. Have them come to the office. Even if you did like a little math on for every hour of treatment time with a patient that you have to drive to, about how much it gets kind of analytical, but it's worth putting in the time. How much driving time is added before and after? And if I cut all of that out, just did office, you're just playing with ideas here. How many
Mm-hmm.
more patients could I see? And remind me, you take insurance or you're private?
I take Medicare Part B only and private pay.
So you do both.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you did nothing but change one-on-one from I go to them to they all come to me, how much more growth, revenue growth, would that be right there? I don't know, but there's one way. And the reason I'm starting here first is scaling, adding more resources, whatever the technology people, whatever, is all well and good, but do it when you really need it. Like my personal mindset is wring every last penny of value you can out of the resources you're already paying for, theoretically before you had anything more. You could do groups in the office, provided that they are willing and able to come. but maybe that's easier than building a group, out there in community X where you'd be. So I don't really know, but play with the different models. The other variable is, okay, theoretically, if I had everybody come to me and they all private paid, you can maybe charge a bit more than what Medicare Part B allows. Well, what could that look like? Or you change the mix, even if you keep, if half your patients were Medicare Part B today and the other half were private pay, if they all came into the office instead of me driving to them, what could that be? And then you could say, all right, it'd be, well, anyway, start there. So start there and then see, and maybe that satisfies your growth aspirations for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're transitioning, as patients are finished and you went and visited them, you don't replace them with a new, I got to drive to you patient. It's coming into the office. And maybe you're one day in the office today, next year it's two, and then you end at three and you kind of migrate. You don't have to do it all in a day.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I'm sort of coming to conclude is that, the office can be both people who come to me, but it can also be virtual, right? So literally it just means I'm cutting out the commuting time, but I can have a sort of a diverse collection of people that come, to the office. And then I think, it's so funny, like the benefits of driving are really on the patient. I love to listen to podcasts. So obviously, like I get a little bit of break, but I'm driving, I'm commuting. It's not really the break for me. And so I think even trying to shrink down, even if I didn't see more people, does the benefit of not having to commute, what does that look like for me? Because one of the things I really think about is like, I've already mentored people. I love to mentor clinically, but like the management and worrying about, so hiring for me is not even something I consider. But the idea, that I would have a chance to bring on, let's say, a virtual assistant. So that's one move that I have had in terms of being able to offload a little bit of administrative work. And that's, I think, I'm sure people who've had a virtual assistant, like I've already had one that wasn't a great fit. And so finding the right person and then really learning how to delegate tasks to her. So like insurance claims, I do all my own billing. She doesn't do that, but I know like craziness. What? But if there's an issue, any issue, so like Medicare Advantage plans, for example, like one of them, says, yeah, no pre-auth needed. You're fine. And then claims aren't getting paid. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, you need pre-auth. So anything like that, I'm just kicking to her and repeatedly and really saying like, call and figure this out for me. And that's been a nice way. So really thinking about putting like squeezing like you're saying, squeezing all the utility out of that too. And then looking at like, what does scale mean for like, why would I want to scale? Do I want to have more influence or do I want to have more money? Right. Or do I want to have more time, which is ultimately money, I guess.
And those are bigger questions to answer than they seem. Like those are questions that I think you should be prepared to just sit with maybe on your drives. What does this mean to me? And the answer doesn't always come right away. But you kind of know it when you got it. And then that's, I said, what kind of revenue do you want? Those other questions, any other thing that's meaningful to you about, I want this practice to be bigger because I want more money. I want more influence. I want more impact on whatever they are. Get those clear first, because then all the questions that come after that start to feel like they fit or do not fit with the answer that you have to those questions. Here's one practical one. What if your model became, if you come to the office, I take insurance. If I have to come to you, it's private pay. And then you could bake in some measure of cost of the travel. It's your time, just like your time is sitting with them. If you're in the car, you really can't be treating somebody else practically. You could be getting other things done. But what if you have the freedom to choose who you bill and how?
I hear that. Medicare, unfortunately, doesn't allow you to charge for travel time or charge privately. So if I had a Medicare, most of the folks who, let's say I'm going into the home to see, are Medicare recipients because they're typically older. There may be a reason why.
So what type of patient are you allowed to bill privately then?
So you can bill anyone who's not a Medicare beneficiary privately.
Okay.
If they're Medicare eligible, you're not allowed to charge them privately at all.
Yeah.
One of the things that my field is private practice owners in speech pathology are definitely thinking about it. I would say this extends to PT and OT, is the concept of wellness, right? So like I have to bill skilled medically necessary therapy to Medicare, and I'm fine with that. Medicare pays me. It's a reduced rate. The government's always, knocking it down a little bit, which is super frustrating.
They just
But
did again.
they
Were you impacted the July? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's awful, right?
Happy
And so
birthday.
yeah, right. So the idea is, with Medicare, it's pretty predictable. And I can't charge anyone privately for skilled therapy. But if I have that patient and they have mild cognitive impairment, and I say, here, we've trained you on certain strategies to address this, and now you can take this home exercise plan we've built and you can practice it on your own. And they say, oh, I don't think I can do it. I say, great, I am here to help. But now we're going to switch it over into a wellness plan. And that's private because Medicare doesn't pay for wellness. And so that's something where I think there's people who are thinking about what cognitive wellness looks like.
Like once you kind of fix the problem, keep it fixed.
Keep it fixed, exactly.
Just like you have to maintain all sorts of other things in life, whether it's your body or your car or whatever. Is sort of ongoing maintenance that's required. Okay.
Absolutely. So, and in terms of groups, some of that is too probably likely to think about looking at the Medicare rules, but there could be something where it says this doesn't apply to Medicare. This is a wellness, or this is a community group, and people can pay in a small amount. And the more people we have, maybe the cost goes down. So they're not having to pay a ton, but they get the advantage of being in a group.
So what proportion of your patients are private pay versus Medicare, would you say about?
I think it really varies, but I would say currently I'm probably doing like 40% are private pay and 60% are Medicare, just currently. I definitely wax and wane with my Medicare clients. The people who are private pay are typically younger, people who are working, people who've had some sort of neurological event, and they are very motivated to get therapy. And so they'll pay me privately, and then I submit a super bill, or I give them a super bill to submit to their insurance for reimbursement.
Okay. But then you're free to charge whatever you like, whatever the market will pay, rather than what insurance will pay, your private rate, right?
Yes. And honestly, in this area, there's so many offerings. People have a choice. And so people want to have good quality therapy. And on, a lot of places, outpatient clinics and stuff, they have wait lists. And so I try to make that work, especially for my private pay clients.
So, another option to grow without adding resources, to scale without adding, is what if you change that mix? What if 60-40 Medicare private became flipped or something more, where it was the majority was private pay and a more minority was Medicare? You're delivering good therapy to whoever is sitting with you.
And that too is interesting, because I think some of that gets into marketing, and marketing for me was like a big burst in the beginning of starting my practice. And then I just made a couple of really nice connections. And then my name has just gotten out there through word of mouth, where a doctor might start sending me. There's one physician who I'm so grateful for. I never spoke to her, but she found me. She was like, yes, this is a service I want my patients to have. And she just sends me people over and over again. So now what I actually have,
is she sending you Medicare patients or private pay, or both?
She's sending me both. Sending me both. But one of the things that I like to do is executive function coaching, right? So that would be more for your individuals with, let's say, a new diagnosis of ADHD. Maybe it's an adult who's been functioning pretty well, but maybe some life transition has led them to sort of conclude that, wow, I'm really not functioning to my highest capacity. And then they go through this diagnosis and they get diagnosed with ADHD, and there's medications for that, but there's a whole skill development, right? So that's the person where I'm like, wow, they don't even know that I exist. Does this doctor know that I exist? There's a sort of a collection of people who call themselves ADHD coaches who may not necessarily have a clinical background. So that's like the next marketing move, is to say to this doctor, who's, by the way, a part of a big neurology practice, hey, I'm going to drop off some brochures and really make sure that executive function coaching service is sort of highlighted, because that, I think, again, that's going to target that private pay community. So that's again, so lucky 2 years in, haven't really had to market, but now I'm sort of thinking the way you're suggesting, which is start to target those individuals who are not going to necessarily be Medicare recipients.
Yeah,
Because
and you face an issue with a lot of marketing agencies are notorious for facing this issue, but anybody who offers a variety of services, same thing. You launch, you open up your doors, and you'll take anybody, right? Because you want the experience, you want the business, you want to get going because you just made this huge decision to launch your own thing. And when there's a variety of services, because you're willing to take anything that comes in, the odds are what usually happens is 2 years in, 3 years, whenever you feel like, holy crap, I'm really busy, the mix of what you have is not the same mix of patients, customers, clients that you would like going forward. You didn't know any better. Nobody knows any better. And then the next phase is, all right, let me start to shape this how I would like it now that I've lived it for a while and I can feel, where I'm bursting, where I'm happy, where I'm not. And so, yeah, maybe that's where you got there faster than a lot of marketing agencies because the need for what you do is unbelievable. I mean, I've got a client who's speech therapist for children, and the number one problem they're having is they can't hire fast enough because the need is massive, and that's just one niche, just like you're in a different part of an already niched world. So maybe that's the next thing for you, and you just let me start to shape this thing. Just get comfortable. The thing that stops a lot of people is, oh, I'd have to say no to this, or I'd have to stop doing that.
Right. I was just thinking
You
that.
got to get
Saying
comfortable.
no.
What if I make this decision of flipping 60-40 now private pay to Medicare, and then tomorrow I get a call from a Medicare patient who sounds really desperate? How the hell am I going to say no?
Please tell me how.
The only way I can think to do it is just know it's coming, practice it, and steel yourself. And then you hang up the phone and you feel like crap for a little while. But you remind yourself, this is the decision I made for a reason that made a lot of sense to me. And that person will find somebody else. You are not the only one on planet Earth, Lauren, who does what you do. It's just that there aren't enough people like you who do what you do because the need is still massive. So, you know what? There's another one. Have some names. I don't do this. I'm not taking anybody right now, but here's a couple of names I trust. I recommend you call them. And then you feel like, all right, I got them. They have to make the call, but I gave them something when I said no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I think, and I speak to speech pathologists about this a lot in private practice where we're so empathetic. And when this person is, I said, I did it yesterday. There was an individual who called me and he's really out of my travel zone. I mean, he's just a little bit farther. I happen to have another client who's sort of nearby. This gentleman is a Holocaust survivor and he has Alzheimer's and he's been a storyteller. He's telling his story and now he's losing his capacity to do that. And I was like, I have to help this guy, right? So now I'm looking at, all right, so now I'm going to be, driving a little bit farther than I want to. And I justified it because I think, first of all, I think it's important that I can be there for this gentleman. And that to me pushed me over into making that choice. But I'm going to get a call from someone who is a Medicare recipient who's not having such a significant life, memory to preserve. And they're going to need therapy, but I do need to kind of set those boundaries. And that's setting boundaries, I think, has been hard. Because like you said, when I first started, I was driving crazy places I would never go today because I just was trying to gain experience and establish sort of where I would be. And so maybe that's the next phase, is kind of saying no to those non-exceptional Medicare recipients and then trying to up my marketing to people who are the people I want to see and then financially are a little bit more lucrative.
Yeah.
The
but
other
maybe
thing
that's
that
it. Maybe it's for that you were to get another call from another really compelling story tomorrow. You build a network of names. I'll bet you probably have a pretty good one already. Like I'm not a good fit for you, and that could be for any reason. You're just too far away. But here's a name of somebody I respect closer to you.
Yeah.
I would call them with everything I know, I'd call them if I were you. And I think they could really help. You have to decide, but that's what I would do. And then you've helped them, you haven't just thrown them back in the ocean to go figure it out on their own.
Right. Which is honestly like navigating the healthcare system, especially when you have a cognitive impairment. It is so challenging. It's hard when you're, cognitively intact. So, I think that those are being a little more choosy. And then, the other thing is just setting boundaries around my time. Yeah. So the other thing that I really need your input on is, really setting boundaries around time that I would call technically administrative, but administrative to maybe grow other parts of my practice that are non-clinically oriented. So one of the things I'm working on actively now is establishing a group of other private practice owners who are doing adult neuro rehabilitation like I am.
Mm-hmm.
People who would benefit from my years of clinical experience and just my experience as a private practice owner, and taking it off of social media, where a lot of these groups are, but like social media, it's kind of problematic and a little stressful,
Mm-hmm.
and having more of an offering of, let's say, a group meeting and then one-on-one mentoring, right? So that to me removes paperwork, it removes commuting, and then it really allows me to tap into my mentoring background, which I loved so much. And so I think having a little bit of time to say, I'm not going to be driving and seeing my Medicare patients, but I'm taking this time to maybe do something that's financially beneficial, but also really allows me to exercise another skill. And that's sort of the other scale concept I was thinking about today was, not scaling to do more patient care, but scaling to really build the services of other practices in any way that I can. Right. So I think that's another thing. And
So
yeah,
let me
I'd
ask
like
you
to
this
hear your
question.
thoughts on it. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So you've got an idea that this group of this population of people that you described need what you have just described, right? Which is they need some kind of coaching to get better at whatever it is they do today. So you don't have to answer this now, but the first question I would ask you is, would they agree with you? Do they think they need that? Is there really a need there? And I don't ask it in a doubting way, because this is, there's a I saw this a lot in my prior career, and you still see it, which is, and I've been guilty of it too. Somebody cooks up an idea and they think it's awesome. And my God, those people need that like you can't believe. The problem is the market of people doesn't see it the same way. And so first you've got to find the legit unmet need that they have that's out there. And the way I would always say is, look, I've got this, what I think is, I've got this idea I think is great, because of course I think it's great. I came up with it, and it's that people like you need coaching like I have, like, and you fill in the details. Do you agree? That's step one. Yeah, I agree. And then step two is, it's hard to ask it this way. There's ways to do this, but it gets into market research methodology, which is totally impractical for small business people like you and me. But it's essentially, would you pay for that and how much?
Yeah.
So when you're devising a product or a service, those things have to be true before, and then you go, all right, could I satisfy that need in that way? Then you go, but first, a lot of people jump over the, do they need this? And say, you need this. And then occasionally it works, but it's kind of lucky because the need was actually there. So
I have actually heard from people and had a trial meeting last month with people who would be interested. And we had that very same conversation. I sent out a Google form. I was like, what would mentoring look like for you? What would you want out of this? How often would you want to meet? Would you want it to be one-on-one? Would you want it to be a group? What would you pay? Because the fact is that
did you get good answers? Like, did you get helpful answers? Okay.
I did. From really,
then do a trial, honest to God, do a trial group.
Yes.
Charge less and say, look, you guys are kind of guinea pigs here. It's a pilot group.
Exactly.
The clinicals I know, the coaching, I know all this, but I just got to kind of test a few things out on you, and they'll probably be fine with it as long as I know what's coming.
Yeah. So that's why we're receptive to that. And then sort of the idea is there are people who are charging essentially what their clinical hourly rate is. And my mindset is, I don't want to do that to a young private practice owner or young clinician, because the fact is they're not made of money. And if they were to spend my hourly rate on me, they would probably do it once or twice and they wouldn't do it again. But if they could spend less, and they gave me a range and we sort of figured out what the median would be for a group opportunity where there would be multiple people, which would honestly be better than just me. It would be people kind of talking things through. For a reduced rate, if everyone pays the reduced rate, it's beneficial for me.
It's more than your hourly, of course.
It's more than my hourly, but it's affordable for them. We could record it. And then the next idea would be to say, for that group alone, how can I send out maybe like a monthly newsletter? So, hey, here's what I'm reading. Here's what I'm listening to. Here's what I'm thinking about. Let's put this into, your atmosphere and see how that helps you. And then a one-on-one that would be obviously a little bit higher, but it would be something that people might want to dip into. Let's say, oh, hey, I'm starting a new thing, or, I really need to talk to you about how to treat, mild TBI.
Mm-hmm.
I need an hour just to chat it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that looks like it's going to be pretty promising. There's obviously time again to budget for learning how Substack works, or trying to figure out some sort of website component that would go out there for future people. But I think that's my idea here of scaling without actually seeing more patients, is that actually helps. I think it helps everyone. It helps the clinical population down the road. It helps therapists I want to see grow into excellent clinicians. And then it helps me because I get to do, something a little different and still make money at it.
Yeah. And so, and we kind of have to bring us to the finish line, because every episode's more about the bite size, in this case, a bite size riffing about ideas. But if we kind of bring it back to the beginning, you brought it back to the beginning, which is, in my opinion, first, just do the numbers exercise. It sounds kind of cold and clinical, but you just kind of have to. And then, how much do I want to grow? You're never going to exactly know. Throw a few numbers out there and see what feels good. And then bring in the other questions that are meaningful to you, the impact on the community, the contributions, everything else. If I did all these are all the things I want to do in 3 years. It's hard to look further down the road than 3 years, and even that's kind of a challenge. And then think about, how close are you to that? Think about changing the mix of patients, about your time, driving versus not, about the group idea. I mean, you've got it's funny, we talked about this. How do I scale without adding people? So far, we haven't really talked about adding much resource at all. I mean, as far as like the billing and the back office stuff, anything that's repetitive can be outsourced, and probably should. And, if you had a bad VA experience once, there's other VA experiences out there. At least, when you hire VA number 2, you've got all the experience from what went wrong with VA number 1, and you can at least learn to not repeat that. And you can do this as fast or as slow as you want, and for me personally, I find if I try to take on more than one sizable thing at a time, it doesn't go very well. I used to start 6 things but finish nothing. That was my experience. So I noticed that. I'm like, time out, Carl. So now I do 1 or 2 things at a time, and the other 3 or 4 things that didn't get done as fast as I initially thought didn't matter, because the 1 or 2 that I chose were good choices. 2 different things might have been good choices. That's been my experience. So the other part about, if you say no to something, like it's really just not yet, right? So that helps me. No, I'm not going to. It's not that you're never going to. Just got to do it yet, because these other things are more important. So there's only so much you can get done. Do it well. As far as like protecting your time, how do you protect boundaries? You just every Friday morning, I'm going to do office stuff, and then don't cheat, because if you cheat on your own system, you're cheating yourself, and you just made Saturday morning hell because you didn't get done on Friday. So you just got to like be just sort of, I don't know, be true to this system that you created. Only you cheated yourself. You're the only one who's going to know it. But you know it. So what good is this practice of yours if you're burning out because you're set up a system but didn't pay much attention to it? So those are my thoughts. In no particular order.
I think scheduling that, sort of admin time, and really saying,
everybody I know does that. It's whatever block of time. It's just,
it has to be there.
You got to be there.
Yeah. And like you said, like it's, the soft spot in me to say yes to someone. The first person I need to say yes to is myself.
Is yourself. And then if you've got to no, there's this classic, if you have to say no, follow it up with some kind of yes. I can't see you, but here's a reference. Go back to the guy who was a little too far away with the crazy stories.
Okay, so follow a no with a yes. I like that a lot. So yes, I validate that you should get therapy, and here's who I would call.
And since, trust my record, you trusted me enough to call me, so trust that I can give you a good name. Yeah, you may not choose that name because you don't feel like it's a click or whatever, but you still helped. You just didn't help through therapy. You helped by getting them to a different landing place. So think about that. That's when I said, build your network of providers within a 25-mile, whatever is a reasonable radius, so that when somebody calls outside of it, or you don't want to take them for whatever reason, because you've set up these boundaries and you're gonna live by them and not cheat on them, that you've got some names to give.
Yeah.
And try that. And try, what's going to happen? Those people are going to start referring you names. You watch, some of them will.
Interesting, because I become sort of a trusted
Yeah.
resource in the community.
And Lauren keeps sending me people. Let's have a coffee. Let's get to know each other. And what's good for you? What's good for me? Um, yeah, it just starts to grow. It just starts to grow. But Lauren, thank you for coming on. This was fun. This went really fast. I don't know about for you. This is like
It does. It
fastest
really
one ever. It's
flew
fun to talk
by.
about this stuff. Thank you for choosing me to kind of, pick a brain and see if I can be. I'm really honored by that you had enough confidence to do this. We're going to put all your contact information that you gave me into the show notes for this episode in case anybody wants to contact you and ask you questions or see if you can help them. And so that then the episode will be up pretty quickly. And just a couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you've got some experience on the business side of practice, like Lauren does, or like I do, whether you're a practice owner like Lauren, or you're somebody who seeks to serve private practices like I do, and you want to share it, we would like you to come on and share that experience with others. In the show notes for Lauren's episode and every episode, there's a link, a couple of questions. Fill it out so that we can know about it and get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to PracticeCare on Apple, Spotify, Google. We're on all the major platforms. We do a new episode every week. If you subscribe, you'll get them, and then you can stay up to date with us. Thanks very much, and until next time.